This is the Marvel Masterworks vidcast, True Believers, where we cover all of the adventures in the Marvel Universe. From the wanderings of the Green Goliath, to the chaotic offices of the Daily Bugle, to the grim alleyways of Hell's Kitchen, and to the top of Avengers Tower. With your hosts, Adam and Chris.
Welcome to another episode of the Marvel Masterworks vidcast and podcast. As always, I'm your host, Adam. And with me this time is my co-host, Chris. Chris, how's it going?
I'm doing very well, Adam. Happy to be joining you once again here. How are you tonight?
I'm doing very well, and we're talking our main discussion. Of course, we're, as we often do when we get together for Marvel, we talk Daredevil. But we're taking a bit of a pause from the Netflix series. I got to check myself. The Netflix / now Disney Plus Daredevil series episode we watched to commemorate the 20th anniversary of the Daredevil feature film, which the actual date was Valentine's Day of this that just passed. But we're still in the 20th year, so we can actually record about the 20th anniversary whenever we want within the course of this year. So that's why we're doing it outside of the actual day and date of the anniversary. Before we do that, as we often do, Chris, when there's news or scuttlebutt around the Marvel Cinematic Universe, we discuss it, and there's a little bit of sort of trials and tribulations going on in MCU land, in the sense that, you know, Bob Iger has come back in at Disney and taken over from Bob Chapek, and under the Bob that is no longer there anymore. His mandate was let's prioritize streaming Disney Plus, and let's crank out as much Disney Plus content as humanly possible. One of the branches that fell under that mandate is Marvel, and hence we got a plethora of Marvel Disney Plus shows. Those have gone in various ways of success, and in that span, we've also had, you know, the rest of Phase 4 play out in the theaters as well, and the results, financially and critically, have not been horrendous by any stretch of any means, but they've been less than what the Disney and Marvel Studios is accustomed to. So now that Bob Iger has come back in, he feels the company has to, you know, save money, and so he's sort of going through a restructuring and a reorganization of the IPs. One of those that is experiencing a restructuring is Marvel, because we're talking about it. And so, to kind of help the situation, Kevin Feige and Marvel are going to spread out their release schedule going forward. I bet that obviously the box office results of, you know, Thor: Love and Thunder and now Ant-Man and the Wasp probably had an impact on this as well, you know, this decision. So basically, you know, instead of getting 15 projects in the span of a year or whatever the case may be, we're going to get far less of that. The Marvels has moved from summer of this year, so I believe November. Right, yeah. And so what are your thoughts on this kind of sort of, you know, spacing out of the projects?
I mean, it seems like we'll definitely be getting less on the streaming side on Disney Plus. I think a lot of the movies they're probably still moving forward with, even if they might be changing some dates like they did with the Marvels. Um, I'm okay with it as long as the focus is on quality and not quantity. I myself have liked most of the Disney shows, but
Yeah,
it's a lot to keep up with. I haven't watched Miss Marvel yet, and
right.
now I'm glad that I have an extra 4 months to watch it because I thought I was gonna have to knock it out before July in time for the Marvels. Um, I'm really looking forward to some of the projects that we know are still moving forward, like Loki season 2.
Of course, yeah, yeah.
I'm super excited to see that, and any Tom Hiddleston I can get, I'll take. Um, but it sounds like that we'll be getting less, but hopefully what we'll be getting will be better than what we have been getting.
I mean,
So
yeah.
yeah, I understand what they're going for, and I'm down with it.
I think because they haven't said they're canceling things that they've announced. So I think right now it's just going to be a little bit longer in the production phases. Like, no, there's no way in hell they're canceling Daredevil Born Again. Um, you know, but that's probably not going to hit our screens until at this point 2025 because of the reshuffling. Do I want it earlier? Yes, but do I want it to be good and actually excellent and worthy of what's come before that we're going to continue reviewing in the interim? Yes, I do. So if that means taking a little bit more time, cool. Also, we're probably going to get at some stage, Nova, because they were talking about a Nova thing for Disney Plus. That'll probably still happen, whether it be Disney Plus thing or a movie, who knows? But I think until they tell us they're canceling certain things, which they haven't yet, I think it's just going to take longer to hit our screens. And given the reports that we're hearing about, visual effects companies being under the crunch and feeling the pressure of the you know predetermined release date and having to make that date and working up to the last minute. Now, having said that, I'm not a visual effects guru. I'm sure you're not either, but we know that they work on these things regardless up until the last hour possible. But when you hear reports of visual effects experts having to sleep in their office and work double time to make a release date, that's going to hamper the quality of what we're seeing on screen because they're rushing shots out. And I haven't seen Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumanium yet. You have,
Hmm.
but I've heard there's some a little bit of wonky effects in certain places. I could tell you, Thor looked less than compared to some of the other Thors. In terms of visual effects, in terms of quality, it was even worse in my opinion. But that's just my opinion. I digress. But in terms of the effects, it looked for a $250 million budget, or which I think it was. It didn't look or feel like that. You know what I mean? So if they need to take some time to give the effects professionals time to perfect their skill and their work, and also have some time to breathe and do basic human things like sleep in their own beds and have semi decent time with their family and meals, then so be it. You know what I mean? We've got a lot of MCU content. We're going to still get a lot of MCU content. If they're asking us for our patience in exchange for quality, I'm more than willing to give it. That's where I'm at. And like I said, they're not canceling Daredevil Born Again or Blade, and those were the two that I was most excited for. So it's a bonus for me. Again, waiting is a pain in the butt in this day and age when everything seems to be at your fingertips. But as you alluded to, right off the top, quality is better than quantity, and so whatever it takes to get that quality, I'm all for. Because certainly Marvel in the MCU, in my opinion, things aren't what they were in the first two phases. And I think once you set that bar so high, as they did with the Infinity Saga, when you start seeing a decrease and you start getting, box office numbers that are showing you a decrease, if you have a chance to step back and say, let's course correct, then you course correct. Because we've seen on our side, not our side, but the other side of the ledger, which that's our sort of, sort of home base, if you will, the DC side, when you're reactive and try to make changes on the fly and start doing patchwork and piecemeal and and glue things together like a puzzle to try and hold things together, that doesn't often lead to success for very long. You may have moments of success like Aquaman and Wonder Woman, the first Wonder Woman, but then you're gonna see the lack of quality and forethought come through in terms of fans' reactions, critical reactions, and then where it really matters to the studio, the money. So they have a chance to step back and course correct, and I'm glad that Bob Iger and Kevin Feige are taking the time and steps to do that, because I think the MCU will be better for it. But we've still got a lot of stuff coming. Like you said, Loki season 2. We've got the Marvels coming out here soon.
Guardians 3.
Guardians 3, that James Gunn's last hurrah in the MCU before he starts cranking bangers off for DC.
And it won't be long until they start up a new Spider-Man movie too, because that's a cash cow for them for sure.
And I'm pretty sure we're still getting X-Men 97 this summer, as from the last I heard. So, I mean, who's not excited for that?
Right.
And if you aren't excited for that, what's wrong with you? But so lots of stuff to look forward to. Blade's going to start filming soon in a couple months. That's exciting. Daredevil's going to start filming in New York soon, right? So, lots of exciting stuff coming. If to fellow Marvel fans, look at this as less of a concern and a negative, and more of a positive, because I think ultimately in the long run it's gonna benefit the head honchos at Marvel and also the fans. So it's a win-win in the long run. Just be a little patient. Any last thoughts on that?
No, I don't think so. I mean, you bring up the effects houses, and when they're putting out 4 shows and 3 movies in a year, that's 7 projects that these effects houses have to do to work on, and the time crunch just has to be, phenomenal on them. So give them the time that they need to do the work that they need to do properly, and put out stuff that you can be proud of, and that people are going to enjoy.
Well said. All right. So with that, we will take a break, and then on the other side of that break, we will come back and revisit the Daredevil film from 2023. So stay tuned.
What's up, everyone? It's the Emerald Enthusiast. For all of your multiverse viewing and listening needs, check out our shows, which include Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Ghostbusters, Power Rangers, the Marvel Universe, and the DC Universe, including the Emerald Echo podcast. You can check us out on Podbean, and remember to subscribe right here on YouTube. That's the Multiverse Musings Podcast Network. From the first podcast to the last.
And we're back, and as promised, it's time to go back 20 years. I was 20. or approaching. I wasn't even 20. I was approaching 20. It was a few months away from 20 when this movie came out, and I am now not that far off from 40. So This was 20 years, a long time ago, and the release of Daredevil, in 2003. Chris, give us a little bit of basics. The cast, crew of the film.
Okay, as you said, this movie came out in 2003 on Valentine's Day with a budget of 78 million. It made worldwide 179.2 million, so a little more than twice the budget. Directed by Mark Steven Johnson, based on the Marvel character, obviously created by Stan Lee and Bill Everett. The main stars of this movie are Ben Affleck as Matt Murdock / Daredevil, Jennifer Garner as Elektra Natchios, Colin Farrell as Bullseye, Michael Clark Duncan as Wilson Fisk / Kingpin, and John Favreau as Franklin Foggy Nelson.
So what you're also saying is, let me see. Just thinking of that cast again. We've got Batman, the Penguin, and Kilowog, all
That's
in this
true.
movie. That's pretty funny. So before we get into the heart of the movie, just try and think back of when you were seeing promotional imagery and trailers for this thing. What was your initial reaction?
Okay, so this was when I was probably pretty hard into my anti Ben Affleck phase,
Oh,
because
okay.
I just thought he was kind of like a pretty boy who was getting roles based on things other than his abilities. I have now changed my tune. I think he's a great actor. I think he's a great director. And going back and watching this, he does a better job in it than I gave him credit for at the time. But I didn't see this one in the theater because I was like, it's just Ben Affleck in some goofy superhero movie. I'm not going to waste my time with it. I saw it later that summer when it came on DirecTV pay-per-view. That's when I finally watched it, and I liked the movie. I liked it more than most people did at the time. So when it came out, I wasn't excited to see it, but I did see it a few months later, and I enjoyed it.
Awesome. Yeah, I was, that was still my initial phases of getting back in to comic book, anything. The first initial foray of that was the combo of Smallville and Spider-Man 1. Um, yeah, and X-Men as well in 2000. We shouldn't forget X-Men. Uh, I would credit Blade, but I didn't know that Blade was a comic book back then. So to me, it was like, oh, a cool vampire movie. Little did I know. But yeah, so it was X-Men, Smallville, and Spider-Man that really got me intrigued about superheroes and comic books again. And then I saw the trailer for this, and you know how they did it back then with from the producers of the X-Men, from the studio, or from Marvel, the creators of Spider-Man, and from the studio that brought you X-Men, right? And so then you see the trailer, and I'm like, I don't know who that is, but I'm intrigued. And then, those were the days where the trailer would direct you to, at the end of the trailer, they'd flash the website. So I went to the website. I saw some imagery. I read some descriptions on the character. I'm like, I'm intrigued by this. It's pretty cool. I want to see this. So I talked to a friend of mine. I showed him the trailer. I showed him the website. He's like, well, it looks cool enough. Let's go see it. But I had no conception of who Daredevil was, what his
Really?
story was. Never read a comic of his back then. I was just like, he's wearing red, kind of like the Flash, except without the running. Um, it's dark, it looks dark and moody, kind of like Batman. I mean, he swings around buildings like Spider-Man. What could go wrong, right? And so I was hooked. The trailer did its job, and I was excited. And then seeing the movie, I really enjoyed it. again, but and I saw it. I did see it in theaters.
See, I had read Daredevil comics, and I kind of was a fan. This was a time in my life when I wasn't actively reading comics because I was in college, and A, I was
Girls,
kind of into
girls,
girls, and
yeah,
B, I was broke, so I didn't have money to spend on comics.
yeah,
But when I saw the promotional materials for it, I was like, oh man, like I love Daredevil, and they're having Ben Affleck play him, like that
yeah.
sucks.
So you
Uh,
were everybody that was, you were everybody in 2014 when he got cast as Batman, pretty much. You just did it 20 years earlier.
True.
Oh, okay, gotcha. Um, but yeah, so that was my perspective, our perspectives going into the movie. And let's talk about the movie now. So, where you have any particular place you want to start with your thoughts? And
Particular place I want to start. Well, do you want me to just go through what I have for the movie, or do you want to
well,
like quick
I mean,
synopsis of what
yeah,
goes
give us a
down?
quick synopsis, and then we'll go through wherever you want to start from. Yeah,
Okay. So Matt Murdock grew up the son of a boxer named Battling Jack Murdock in Hell's Kitchen, New York. Due to an accident as a child, Matt loses his eyesight, but his remaining four senses are heightened. And when Matt discovers this, he begins to train himself to use these senses and to train himself physically and mentally. Um, Due to a decision his father makes to not throw a fight that he's supposed to take a dive on to win some money for a gangster, Jack Murdock is killed. And Matt dedicates himself to the promise that he made to his dad to help people and to be a force for good. And he does this in two ways. He becomes a lawyer, which his dad wanted for him. His dad wanted him to study the books, to not be a fighter, and to be like a doctor or a lawyer or something like productive. So Matt achieves that goal. But he also sees that he can't win all of the battles in the courtroom, and that sometimes justice needs to be meted out outside of the courtroom doors. So he adopts the mantle of Daredevil, a basically a street fighting superhero, um, and uh, and yeah, that's the gist of it.
yeah. And then he fights
But
crime and
throughout the course
corruption.
of the movie, we come into contact with a lot of people that viewers and comic readers will recognize from the comic stories as they all weave in and out of his story. The main crux of which is he's trying to take down the number one gangster in New York called the Kingpin, who they say is responsible for all the crime in New York City. The problem with that is he gets entangled with a love interest named Electra Nachios, who is the daughter of a billionaire named Nicholas Nachios, and he is in business with Kingpin and tries to get out of business. Kingpin doesn't take this very kindly, so he puts out a hit on Nicholas Nachios, which is successful. He's killed by the villain Bullseye, but in this murder, Bullseye makes it look like Daredevil has caused the killing.
Right.
So Elektra is on a mission to take down Daredevil until she discovers that he's Matt Murdock, who is her boyfriend, her love interest, and then she is unfortunately taken down by the Kingpin as well, and Matt has to battle the Kingpin in the final showdown.
Very well said. Um, One of the things I was really sort of, struck by right off the bat was the opening credits, how they were done in Braille, and how as you're going through the credits, you're going through the buildings of Hell's Kitchen. I like that opening.
It was
Uh,
cool.
that was really well done. The other thing is you start the movie with that iconic shot of Daredevil perched on the cathedral cross, and then he rappels down, and he's wounded. So you see that he's in action. The priest takes the cowl off, and it goes through Matt's eyes, and that's where the backstory comes in. I love the way they did that, and I gotta say, in the short instances of time that we got with Matt and his father, like the whole origin montage and all that, That was done very effectively because they tell you the basics, what you need to know. They show you what you need to know, and through the course of that, you also get the relationship with Matt and his father, which I think in the limited spurts that we got was very effective. Made you care about those two, and then so that when we see his death and Matt's sort of mission and how that springs about, you believe it. I thought it was done well. Any thoughts on all that?
I agree. Obviously, they didn't have as much time to spend on that backstory as what we got in the Netflix series, because over
Yeah,
the course of 13 episodes, you can really dive into a lot of that stuff. But I thought it did a really good job of illustrating the relationship between Matt and his dad. His mom is not around, and I don't really think they don't discuss his mom much, do they?
no,
There's not much backstory given on what happened to her or why she's not around, but you see that Matt, even being, I think he's 12 years old when this happens.
right.
Even at 12 years old, he is both taking care of his dad in a way, but also working hard to escape the situation that they're in. They're kind of living in a crummy apartment in Hell's Kitchen, you know. So Matt is taking care of his father while also having the responsibility of working really hard so he can escape the situation that he's in.
Right. Yeah, I agree. And
And they show, you know, even after he loses his eyesight, that could probably keep a lot of people down. You know, you could be very discouraged about
sure.
that, but you know, they show him diving into learning how to read Braille and continuing his studies and stuff, because he makes a promise to his dad and he wants to keep that promise.
And also, I really like how they showed, once the accident happens and you see him recovering from his, bandaged up and all that. The way they deployed and showcased the radar sense,
Mm-hmm.
I really like that
Yeah,
visually.
you
There
first
was
hear what sounds like, which is it's overpowering to Matt's senses. He jumps up in the hospital bed, and you can hear like what sounds like a rush of like water smacking, but it's the IV. It's just a little drip of the water in the IV dropping into the bottom of the bag. And you're right, the way that they showcase that with the radar waves kind of going out and showing the room
yeah,
around him, it was a really cool visual and a good depiction of how he uses his powers.
right. Yeah, I agree. It was so well done. And then look, even when you see him sort of testing his powers as a kid, and then being bullied, and then fighting those other kids, and he's doing some impossible things with one hand, sort of doing it kind of like a handstand on the roof of a building. Is it ridiculous? Is it implausible? Yes, but
Sure.
we're living in first of all, what, like, when people critique that stuff, look what you're watching. There's got to be an element of, all right, look, I'm watching Daredevil. I either suspend my disbelief or I can't watch this thing. If you can't accept that this blind kid got these extraordinary powers because of that acid, which may or may not be the same ooze that transformed four turtles. In my head canon, it is. Whether anybody wants to acknowledge it anymore or not, too bad. Um, if you can't accept that he has these powers because of that ooze / acid, well then watch something else.
And you bring up, you mentioned the accident where he gets his powers. It's a bit of a different depiction in this story than what we get in other media, right?
Hmm.
So in other media, isn't it more like akin to like a car accident?
Yeah.
Whereas in this one, so young Matt has heard a rumor that his dad is working for a gangster,
Hmm.
and he asks his dad about it, and his dad is like, "Well, do you think I would be working all these double overtime shifts down at the docks if I was doing that kind of work? I don't think so." Well, Matt catches him doing that kind of work. He's probably walking to school or something, and he sees his dad outside a building like roughing some guy up because the guy owes some money to someone, and they lock eyes. Jack and Matt see each other, and Matt takes off, and as he's running away through the docks, you see a forklift turn and slice through this barrel of hazardous materials, which spray Matt on his face, and he immediately loses his
Right.
eyesight. But it's a little bit different in how it's depicted in this. But I kind of like it because you can think that Matt's dad probably feels the guilt for the accident,
Sure.
because if he hadn't been seen by Matt doing what he was doing, Matt wouldn't have run from him, and this wouldn't have
Yeah,
happened.
which gives him more of an impetus to want to get out, right, of that lifestyle. Um, the other thing I wanted to mention about the whole training montage is the Stan Lee cameo when young Matt uses his cane to prevent Stan Lee, who's reading a newspaper, from walking into oncoming traffic. That was a pretty cool little small cameo where it was, a nice nod without being too obvious or overbearing. At that stage of the game, they weren't trying to, beat us over the head with, hey, look, it's Stan Lee. If you knew, you knew. And if you didn't, oh well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not the same as him like getting drunk in an Avengers movie and
Yeah,
acting all goofy. He doesn't even have a line in this one.
right.
Young Matt just holds out his walking stick to prevent him from walking forward into the traffic, and Stanley like looks at the kid for a little while, but that's all you get out of it. So you're right.
Yeah.
You're not being beaten over the head with it. It's not cartoony. It's not
Yeah.
slapstickish or anything like that. But he's there.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Let's fast forward a little bit to adult Matt, where we see him in the court room. And first of all, the way they set this courtroom, the way they light it, it's very drab, dingy.
Yep.
So it's kind of trying to evoke the idea that, look, Hell's Kitchen is apt to its name, a hellhole, and it looks like that, right?
You're right. It's not like a fancy Manhattan courtroom that you like saw the Ghostbusters in or anything like that.
Right. Yeah. It's not picturesque New York. That's for sure. And so Matt and Foggy are trying a rape case.
And did you notice the rapist's name?
Joe Quesada, who was the editor in chief at Marvel for a time and is now drawing awesome Batman variant covers for the Batman comic. So if you're into variant covers, I suggest picking up his covers because they're awesome.
Yep, that's one Easter egg in this movie is the Quesada name. And did you notice the other Easter egg?
Probably, but enlighten me because it's been.
So when Jack Murdock is approached by the gangster about taking a dive in the fight, they show the marquee for the fight, and he's fighting against John Romita.
Right, which is a longtime artist of Daredevil, which is pretty cool.
I like when they throw things like that into the movies for the fans.
But they're subtle so that fans get it, but they don't throw you like you're not. Ooh, look at that! Let me take myself out of the movie now.
Right.
So you're right. I like that. So of course, Mr. Quesada gets off on a technicality. Matt knows that he's lying, and so that night, Matt says, "Okay, the justice system failed. I'm going to go get myself justice." And basically, our intro to Daredevil, I think, is pretty awesome because it's a bar fight where he tracks down Mr. Quesada with his buddies, and he's bragging about doing what he did to that girl. And all of a sudden, with his cane that turns into what would you call those? What the weapon that he uses? A billy club? What?
I'm not sure. I was trying to look it up on the internet.
They're
earlier.
not nunchaku, are they? No.
But they kind of become that when he pulls them apart and it's got the rope in the middle.
Right. So fair enough. Yeah. So anyway, he takes out the lighting, and it's just basically you see flashes of Daredevil in darkness, and you see his Daredevil like his radar sense, and he's just laying waste to everybody in the bar. And the fight ends with, or the bar portion of it ends with a burnt 2Ds burnt into I think it was the floor or the pool table, one of the two,
Yep.
which I thought was an awesome visual. I think that whole sequence was pretty cool because if they had done that for the whole film where you could barely see him, I would have got perturbed by that. But for that intro, and you're like, oh, what's going on? What's going on? It's intriguing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then they carry it forward because he's stalking Joe into the subway uh, tunnels and ultimately watches him get run over by the C train. And even says, there's this one line, and it's straight out of classic Daredevil comics where he's like, that light you're about to see, that's not heaven, that's the C train. So everybody that critique that line and cringes at that line, it's right out of the comic. So I mean, and all that put together, that's an awesome intro for Daredevil.
Yeah.
Uh, uh, Also, you could tell this is an early 2000 movie because there is popular music of the time playing over the entire fight. It's Nickelback. And yes, I know I'm Canadian and I'm supposed to be pro-Canadian artist. I ain't just, I'm not a fan of Nickelback overall.
We do get some Evanescence later in the movie.
Yeah, that is better. But it's like you can tell it's a 2000. It's an early 2000 superhero soundtrack.
When they were definitely getting like popular bands of the time to produce songs so they could sell the soundtrack, which now really isn't a thing anymore.
And I kind of miss that because I actually overall I really like the Daredevil soundtrack. I still have it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's still
Cool.
somewhere here, but I have it. I know I have it. Uh, that and Batman Forever are okay. So it's
Batman Forever is a legit soundtrack.
So here's my top three that I can think of. 89 takes the cake. Prince, right? Second is Batman Forever. Probably third is Daredevil.
Batman Forever had
I had everybody.
Seal, Method Man, U2, Flaming Lips.
It was ridiculous.
It's great.
It was. I still have that one, and I do listen to it on occasion. Not gonna lie. So we get through that. One thing I really found fascinating, anytime I watch the movie, is we see the aftermath of that scenario for Matt Murdock. He goes into his apartment, but more importantly, he goes into what amounts to his bedroom, which looks more like a dungeon / basement, where he sleeps in a kind of a deprivation tank, like a water deprivation tank that blocks out the sound, so he doesn't hear everything, right?
Yeah, and it's really well illustrated when it shows him coming out of that tank, because immediately you hear sirens and people screaming, and so you get a sense of what it must be like for him to be bombarded with that all the time.
Right. So I thought that was really cool, and I thought you see the wounds on his back, the scars on his back and his arms, and so and he pulls out a tooth, I think, at one point.
Yep.
And he takes some painkillers. So it's like, sure, he won the fight and he cleaned up pretty good, but he took some hits along the way. And I think that's important to show, because it's like the dude's still doing all this while blind, and that's important to reiterate, right?
Well, and he's still human, his senses might be highly attuned, but he's still flesh and blood.
Right. Before we get to the relationship with Foggy and Matt and the introduction of Elektra, one of the things we got to keep note of is now, after this event, there's a reporter on the trail of Daredevil now.
Ben Urich.
Right. And in the comics, he works for the Bugle. In the movie, I'm not sure if it was the Bugle or not.
You know, I
because
don't remember. They showed his story at the end of the movie about. They showed his story about Kingpin, but I didn't take note of what the name of the publication was.
yeah, and the reason why it might not be is because
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man is owned by Sony.
Right.
Fox at this point had the rights to Daredevil, so back then the studios weren't playing nice with these IPs. So uh,
Sure.
chances are it was probably different. But it's worth noting that Ben Urich is on the case because he comes into play later, and we even get well. We'll talk about the cameo in a second when we get there. But um,
That's one of the actors I left out in the beginning.
Joe
Ben
Pantoliano,
Urich is played by Joe Pantoliano, who's
yeah,
great, always.
he's fantastic. Yeah, I agree. I gotta say, I really like the interplay between Ben Affleck and John Favreau as Matt and Foggy. Uh,
Does he actually call him Foggy in the movie?
yes, I
I
think
know when he introduces himself, when they introduce themselves to Wilson Fisk, he introduces himself as Franklin Nelson. But I guess that's his more professional name.
yeah, I think Matt refers to him as Foggy,
Gotcha.
and there's this constant back and forth of Foggy's like we need clients that pay, and Matt's like yeah we're out to help people whether they can pay or not. And there's that constant banter of back and forth between the two of them. Those opposing ideals. That's not to say Foggy is a bad person. He just wants to get paid for the work he's doing, which is a respectable ask of somebody that's employed or trying to make a living. You know what I mean?
Yeah, he wants money, not fish for
Yeah,
payment.
right, exactly. So they're at this coffee shop in this one scene in the movie, and um, they talk about a news story about the mysterious Daredevil, and they play it off as like an urban myth, or actually Foggy believes it, but Matt plays it off as an urban myth, and you see them playing pranks with each other. Like I think Foggy had put mustard in his coffee, or some in Matt's coffee.
Matt asks has Foggy to pass the honey, and
Yeah,
Foggy passes him mustard instead, and
right.
Matt
That's
puts
it
it in his coffee. But then when Foggy's not looking, Matt switches their coffee cups.
because he smelled, yeah, or saw him with the radar do it. So then, um, before she enters the building, Matt can sense this beautiful scent, right? And he's like, he asks Foggy, "What she look like?" And then Jennifer Garner walks in, looking fantastic as Jennifer Garner often does. And I have to point out that yes, Jennifer Garner on the list. But and I don't know how Ben Affleck's gone from Jennifer Lopez to Jennifer Garner, small stop to on with Anna de Armas, and then back to Jennifer Garner. That guy's just, I mean, he's swimming in luck. But anyway, so she walks in. He asks Foggy what she looks like. Foggy plays a joke. She's like, she's hideous, which obviously not. Matt goes towards her, bumps into her, probably accidentally on purpose, asks for the sugar. She, being hit with his cane, kind of says, "What are you?" Not knowing, because she can assume he sees the sugar. He's like, "What are you?" And then he's about to say blind, and he says, "Blind, yeah." And then there's this whole banter. They start talking. She's very apologetic. He asks for her name. She doesn't give it, so he chases her. So in the theatrical cut, there is a schoolyard. What is the seesaw?
Mm-hmm.
Bench fight, playful fight between the two. In the director's cut, there's not. Um, the theatrical cut version didn't really bother me. Is it a theatrical masterpiece of a scene? No. Does it kill the movie for me? Absolutely not.
No.
So that's my take on it.
It's a little like meet cute, he's trying to get her name. She doesn't want to give it up. She's probably approached by guys all the time because she's super hot and she can kick all their asses. And so she's just blowing this guy off as one of any number of other guys she probably deals with on a regular basis. But then they have their little sparring match and he shows her that despite his difficulties in seeing, he can more than keep up with her.
Right.
So now she's interested.
Yeah, and it's overall the whole back and forth, the scenes with them was believable.
I mean, it's silly when they both do like a backflip and they land with one foot on each seesaw and they're balancing it out. Like, obviously not. That's never going to happen. But as you said earlier,
everything before that
to the suspension of disbelief part.
Yeah, but everything before that, I think, is very realistic. Like, bumping into her, asking her for the sugar or whatever.
Oh yeah.
That conversation leading before they get to the seesaw thing, bench, that was unbelievable. So it's like, all right, I can roll with this, right? And then the other part is just like I said, and you reiterated, suspension of disbelief. Just go with it. It's the early 2000s. Let's call it what it is. So where do you want to go from here? I've led us to this point. You tell us where you want to pick up next.
Well, right after the fight, when she does finally introduce herself to him as Elektra Nachios, we go immediately from there to a scene with her father and Kingpin, which we haven't met her father before, but we know it is her father because Kingpin calls him Nachios, and she has just given her name. So they put those scenes next to each other, so you know who you're dealing with.
Right, sure. Yeah.
Obviously, so Mr. Nachios is a billionaire, and he's involved in some type of business or extracurricular activities with Kingpin, and he tells Kingpin he wants out. That he wants Kingpin to buy him out, and that he has an offer already put together that the Kingpin should find favorable. But Kingpin isn't taking kindly to this, and he instead puts out a hit on Mr. Nachios in the form of Colin Farrell's Bullseye.
And that was an introduction and a half. First of all, I got to say about Michael Clarke Duncan. Man, was that guy absolutely perfect for this role. Like, he was intimidating. He had that suaveness where 1 minute he's just a really, influential businessman. But then he could turn the switch and you see this foreboding, dangerous mob boss. And it was, back in those days, there was nobody of that size that could have probably played, the director, Mark Steven Johnson, is probably right when he says back then, there was nobody of that size that could play that part.
He's a big dude.
And yeah, Colin Farrell had a ball doing what he was doing. Like, he was having it up, chewing the scenery, but he was having fun with it. And for a guy like Bullseye that's, 10 kinds of crazy, that kind of performance works, I think, on the whole.
I mean, you see how sadistic he is when we're first introduced to him, when the bar owner calls him like Irish scum or something like that, and he pulls out paperclip and flings like 6 of them in the guy's throat and just sticks him where he stands.
Right.
He will kill a man in cold blood just for a simple backhanded comment.
And was it in the theatrical or the director's cut or both, where he's on the plane and he kills that old lady because she talks too much and he does it with peanuts?
It's in the theatrical. It might be in the director's cut too. I haven't seen that one in a long time. I watched the theatrical version for this podcast.
Yeah.
But yeah, when he flicks the peanut off the back of the seat and it goes in her throat.
Yeah, I'm like.
And then the stewardess comes by and she's like, "Oh, she's asleep."
And he's like, yeah, and he pats her on the head. That was pretty funny. Obviously his look is altered from the comics. He's in a leather jacket. He's in a lot of spiky leather, and instead of having, because in the comics he's wearing basically spandex,
Right.
and he's got the bullseye identification on his costume. Because there's no costume, it's branded in his head in this iteration. It's a tattoo kind of thing, which
It
is
looks
fun.
like he carved a bullseye into his head and it's scarred over.
And it shows you how sophisticated he is, right? Like that's the cool part of it. Then I guess we can go to the ball or to the fundraiser that Fisk was having, right? Um, where Fisk approaches Nelson and Murdoch and says, "I want you to be my representation." Foggy's all excited because that would bring in lots of cash,
Yeah, he's seeing dollar signs for sure.
and Matt's like, "Absolutely not," because Matt knows or believes and understands the like who Wilson Fisk really is. So he wants nothing to do with that. Um, so he turns him down, which doesn't sit well with Mr. Fisk. And then he gets a glimpse of Elektra, and she's done up to the nines and wearing an amazing looking dress, and they have this interaction where he could almost make her out, with his radar senses, but he couldn't because there were people smoking, and that kind of clouded his vision. And she even says something to the effect of, "I got all dressed up for you," and blah blah blah. So they have this dance, um, and then was this the moment where they went outside in the rain? Oh, I think it was, right. The same. I think it
No.
was.
Let me see. No, the rainstorm
Is that after, or
occurs
did
right
I miss it?
before the party.
Okay, so yeah, so let's talk about that. Right before the party, he meets her.
He says he wants to take her to a special place, and
Right,
it's on a rooftop that he says was his favorite view of the city when he was a kid and still had his eyesight.
right, and so he tells her that it's going to rain. She says no, it's not, and then it starts, and he's like, he takes off the glasses and he lets the water hit his eyes, and he can make, because of his radar sense, he can make out what she looks like in that scene, and that was done really really well.
Yeah.
Like the visuals of that. I'm like, yeah, even Raindrop Jennifer Garner is a 20 out of 10. And very romantic scene. I got to give him credit for that. And I believe in the director's cut, this is the scene where they then go and have relations. Let's call them that, because I know that wasn't in the theatrical, but it was in the director's cut. So there's that. But then we get the party stuff.
And at the party, Kingpin threatens her father and puts a rose in his lapel of his jacket, and that is the Kingpin signal for
You
you
dead.
did.
That's you dead. Yeah, you're done. Right. That's like the Undertaker doing this, and then about to give you the choke slam on the tombstone, basically, to take it back to wrestling because I like to do that every once in a while. But anyway, so now we get the chase scene because I like her phone. Once as soon as he gets the rose, and I think Kingpin even says to him, "It'd be a shame if something happened to that pretty daughter of yours," right? And so that's when he rushes her out of there and kind of explains the situation. Matt obviously gaining insight that this kind of thing is happening. He suits up. We obviously get the suit up montage because early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s superhero movies had to have suit up montages. Um, And so we get this battle where on motorbike, uh, eh, Bullseye is chasing the limo with Mr. Nachos and Elektra, and Daredevil is trailing them on the rooftops of um, the city. And then there's the scene where you alluded to earlier in your description where um, um, Bullseye is about to go for the kill shot, but then Daredevil blocks him with his staff, his nunchaku slash staff slash cane. But then so it hits. I think it hits Bullseye, uh, and he's kind of marked, and he's all pissed off about that. And then he uses that, uh, or at least the bladed portion of Matt's weapon, and he throws it uh, towards Elektra's father, so that when he ends up dead, Elektra notices the weapon and equates Daredevil killed my father. So that's where the misconception sort of comes from. We get the funeral scene.
It reminded me of Spider-Man 1 when, Harry at the end thinks that Spider-Man is the one who killed his father when his dad kind of like actually killed himself and stuff. And there's a misunderstanding that is going to like come back later.
Yeah. So there's the funeral scene. It's raining. Matt goes to try and comfort Elektra. She's very cold, unreceptive to that, to the point where it was about to start raining, or Matt took off his glasses to do the whole raindrop see her thing, and he starts to see her, but then she puts up her umbrella so he can't. And I think that's twofold. A, because she just wasn't having it at that moment, and two, she was kind of shielding, showing her pain, right? Showing that emotion that he'd be able to see in that moment. So I think it's a twofold kind of thing. And then, Kingpin tells Bullseye to take out Elektra, and then Bullseye says, "Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that for money, and I'll do Daredevil for free."
Yeah.
And then they make a joke about him wanting a costume. In the theatrical cut, he says bloody. In the director's cut, he says the full F expletive.
Huh.
And then we have another montage of Elektra practicing piercing what looked to be sandbags or rice bags of some or whatever with her sai, which kind of had me thinking of Raphael for a little bit, just because
Sure.
sai. And Daredevil's doing his thing as another suit up thing, and then we're back on the rooftops of Hell's Kitchen, and we're having a confrontation. Daredevil is chasing down Bullseye, and Elektra's chasing down Daredevil.
Right.
Daredevil meets up with encounters Elektra. They are both fighting and kind of talking or arguing at the same time.
He's telling her that he didn't kill his father.
Right. He's trying to
believe it.
Yeah, he's trying to exonerate himself. She's saying you're lying. She ends up piercing him, I believe, in the shoulder. Then she says, "I want to see the face of my father's killer." She pulls off the mask, and lo and behold, it's Matt Murdock. She is.
But she's not. When it happens, she doesn't go to, "Oh my God, my boyfriend killed my dad." Once she sees that it's Matt, she immediately knows that he didn't do it because of how she feels about him. So I was glad that they played it that way instead of taking the misunderstanding even further. She sees Matt and she knows that she's been wrong.
And then at that moment, Bullseye launches his or makes his presence known Elektra throws her side towards him. He catches it, throws it back, and actually pierces her through the hand, which was pretty visceral and violent for the time.
Yeah, it shows her pulling it out. I mean, it.
Which is kind of disturbing. Daredevil is kind of incapable at this point of helping her, so she takes up the charge herself, and goes to fight him. He's just too strong of a fighter for her. I mean, he is an assassin after all. At this point, Elektra isn't. And he stabs her in the stomach, and it basically goes through her, like you see it out the other side of her back, and it's actually another image straight out of the comics, like as panel for panel as you can go, given that they were wearing slightly different outfits. But other than that, it was pretty much blow for blow. And then he throws her, towards where Daredevil is, right? And then makes his getaway. Daredevil crawls over to Elektra, is very, distraught. It's worth noting that at one point in the film, Daredevil had given, or Matt had given Elektra a braille necklace. So that's worth keeping tabs on, because it'll come back to play in a second. So when Daredevil's able to, cobble himself together, he's off to the races to chase after Bullseye. And this is where we catch up to the beginning of the film,
right?
Because we have Daredevil back on the cross of the chapel or the cathedral, and he repels down. So we're playing the beginning part again, except this time Matt tells the priest to hide. He puts the cowl, his mask back on, and him and Bullseye are squaring off in this chapel, cathedral, whatever. And it's a pretty good fight, I would say.
That part where Bullseye broke the stained glass window and caught all the pieces of glass and then starts throwing them at Daredevil, but Daredevil
like ninja
dodging
stars.
all of them.
Yeah.
That was really, really well done, I thought.
Really well done. And then their fight escalates to the top of the bars of, not the bars, the pillars of the cathedral organ, if I have that right.
Right.
And again, you could say that that's unrealistic, and you're not objectively wrong, like it is, but we're not watching The Dark Knight, where Nolan tried to ground as much as possible. This was never that.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't, when looking back on it, I don't think you should have that expectation of it. I thought for the time and for the visual effects that they had at the time, I thought that was pretty cool. And I was thoroughly entertained while I was watching it. And whenever I do watch it, do the effects look a little dated now? Of course.
Sure.
We're talking 20
years.
But back then, I was like, holy crap, this is pretty cool. And then, Bullseye gets thrown through a window, and he falls onto a police car.
No, he falls on Ben Urich's car.
Oh, sorry, Ben Urich's car. That's correct. Yeah, sorry, my mistake. No.
Ben Urich's looking for a story, and it literally lands right on top of his car.
Yeah. And interesting of note, just prior to this final battle, Ben Urich had gotten the Billy Club from the altercation on the street that killed Elektra's father. He brought it to a forensic The core. Who did he bring it to? Some forensic scientist, I think,
Yeah, I guess so. Played by Kevin Smith.
played by Kevin Smith, which is pretty funny.
Yeah.
Who big he wrote a Daredevil arc. He's a Batman fan.
Good friends with Ben Affleck.
Good friends with Ben Affleck. Showrunner of Masters of the Universe, Revelation. So he's touched a lot of the geek stuff that we like.
Sure.
So I think that's pretty cool. And so he figured out how to manipulate the weapon and sees that it turns into a walking cane. So he's put two and two together that Matt Murdock is Daredevil. I don't know if you remember this, but in the director's cut, he confronts Matt about it.
No, I don't remember that.
And to dissuade him, I think Matt crashes a car on purpose, if I remember correctly. I haven't watched the director's cut in some time. And that kind of throws Ben Urich off the scent a little bit because he's like, wow, okay, clearly this guy's, but then, he still has his suspicions, as we see later in the film, at the end. So before the end, we see sort of Matt kind of wandering around, kind of sad and depressed, right? And he finds, as he's walking, he finds hanging I guess it was his favorite spot as a kid. It was put there. I think that's where he was, if I remember correctly. He finds the Braille necklace that he'd given Elektra. So the implication is that she's alive. And then he's got a bit of a smile on his face. And then we cut to the end where Ben Urich is writing his story about the identity of Daredevil. He's going to expose that it's Matt Murdock. But then he sees Daredevil on a rooftop, and he kind of acknowledges him, and then you see him delete the story. So the implication is that he's going to protect the secret. And then there's this big final, before the end, where Daredevil's swinging and jumping through the rooftops of the city, and then repels down in a very classic Daredevil spin and grapple maneuver straight out of the comics, and then that's how the movie ends. I would have loved the sequel to this movie. Unfortunately, didn't do well enough to garner that. Pun not intended. But overall, I like what we got. Anything you want to add about all the stuff I rambled off there?
No, just wanted to note that at the end, after Daredevil defeats Kingpin and blows his legs
we didn't
out.
talk about that shit. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty good battle. But he is in position to take Kingpin's life if he wants to, and instead he spares him and to turn him into the police and make him face his day in court, rather than taking him out. So it's kind of juxtaposed with Quesada earlier in the movie. Now Daredevil doesn't specifically kill him, but he doesn't save him either.
There's character growth there
when he can, but yeah, you're right. So he, instead of acting on vengeance at the end, and he discovers that Kingpin is the one who killed his father. He discovers that because his father, he had left a rose on his father's body, and so Matt learns this later in the movie, and he shows great restraint and not taking vengeance out on the man who is responsible for killing his father and his girlfriend.
And the cool part about that fight was that the way it was done in the office building, and to kind of sort of even up the playing field, the sprinklers are set off so that Matt could see where Kingpin was, because before that happened, Kingpin was giving him a beating.
Yeah, he was giving him the business for sure.
Like there was that part where he superplexed, like he lifted him up like he was going to do like an Ultimate Warrior kind of thing, and he slammed him against the top, the roof, right?
Yeah,
And that was pretty cool. Or he threw him through the glass. That was pretty. So he took a beating,
sure
but then
did.
once those sprinklers went off and he could see, and the way he took out the knees,
Ooh,
and you could hear the cracks. It was that was one of my favorite fight scenes. I got to say,
it was a good one.
in the movie. I think if there's a three-way, I like all the three big ones, which was the finale, the the church battle with Bullseye, and I liked the intro scene for Daredevil. Those were my top three. But yeah, overall, I have a fun time with this movie.
Sure.
Still to this day when I watch it. So it's one of my favorite pre MCU Marvel films. So yeah, if there's nothing else you want to add, we can go ahead and rate this. We're going to give it a letter grade. So Chris, what would you give Daredevil?
Daredevil for me is a B- movie. It's not fantastic. It's not anything that's groundbreaking, but it's not bad. It's not nearly in the category that some people would like to put it in. So, if I'm grading it, I'm thinking it's somewhere around like, um, yeah, I'd say a B-. It could be better, but it's not bad. I have fun. I have fun with it. I enjoy it. But it's not something that is going to change the face of comic book movies forever.
Right. I'll go ahead and give it slightly higher. I'll give it a B plus.
Okay.
And the reason being is that when I came out of this movie, this is not a joke. I called the guy then who was my comic book guy back 20 years ago, and I said, I just got out of Daredevil. I really like the movie. I need to start reading Daredevil. So when I come in next time, I have a graphic novel put aside that I can buy. So my enjoyment of the movie led me to the comics. So
Cool.
um, that's one of the goals. I would think. I mean, if you can do that, you've done a pretty good job. Um, so yeah, B plus. I can rewatch it. I enjoy it a lot more than you know the Fantastic Four movies.
Sure.
All three of them. I enjoy it a lot more than um, some of the X-Men movies. Not all of them, but some of them. Namely, Last Stand and X-Men Origins Wolverine and Dark Phoenix. Um, I enjoy it more than, and this is going to be controversial. I enjoy it more than all four Thor films. um, all three Ant-Man films. So it's got two Ant-Man films. I haven't seen the third one, so I can't judge it without seeing it. But so it's up there. Um, so I enjoy it, and I have fun with it, and it made me a fan of this character, who I'm still reading and enjoying today. So uh, that's why I give it a B plus. But that brings us to the end of our Daredevil review. The next time we talk Daredevil, it will probably be either a comic book review or getting back to our episode rewatch. But in the meantime, if you want to chat Daredevil with us, you can on social media. Chris, where do they track you down?
I'm on Twitter at Chris N. Harrelson or search for Commodore Schmidlap. And Adam will post about this in the Facebook group, and I'll be there if you want to talk.
Indeed. I am on social media on Twitter at Adam_Leafs_fan. The podcast network has its own Twitter page at MMNPDC. We have the Facebook group that Chris alluded to. The link is in the description below. Click that. I will add you. We can continue the conversation there. But until next time, remember that the 2003 Daredevil movie is forever. From the first time that Matt Murdock and Elektra have a romantic moment in the rain, set to an Evanescence song, till the last. So long.